Great, well, welcome. Got it. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Messier. I am an ex officio member on Pub and also Water Bureau staff. I am filling in today as our facilitator for Karen, who is out on a well-deserved vacation. So she has big shoes to fill, so I hope I will do it adequately well today. So I will run through our beginning slides here and call this meeting to order. So under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone. And the city has made available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. So I'm also going to cover the Pub belief, values, and anti-racist principles. Pub believes and acts upon anti-racist principles. In our meeting spaces and interactions with Pub, while every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there's wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. And putting our principles into actions, we speak up and speak out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board and focus on the impacted individual or population, condemn the conduct and not the person.
Hi, my name is Amy Archer-Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the hosts, myself and Sarah Messier today. Please limit any chats to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, to ask for technical assistance, or remind us that you've been waiting to speak if you've not been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. The co-host may lower your hand once you begin speaking just to maintain the flow of the conversation. During the public comment period, the public can raise their hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, you may need to press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking. If desired, it is not required. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you're connecting by phone, you may need to press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. As mentioned, public comment will be taken during the public comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through a chat with myself or raise your hand during the comment period. It also is available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. As mentioned, this meeting is being recorded. I'll pass it back to you, Sarah, for the agenda.
Thanks, Amy. So our agenda today, our call to order, hellos, and disclosure of communications, and then our public comment and review of minutes. Then we'll be revisiting and reviewing our Pub's beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles that Lorraine and Heather were working on. So I'll be asking Lorraine to provide sort of a verbal summary of what they were working on. And we had those, Amy sent those out before the meeting. So I hope everyone had a chance to look through those. And then we have Cecilia Hune from the Water Bureau here to talk about wholesale agreements, an overview from the Water Bureau. And Amy has some information from other jurisdictions about wholesale agreements. And then we'll round out the meeting with announcements, talk about our next meeting, and then hopefully adjourn at 5 o'clock. So another action-packed meeting. So we will start with our hellos and disclosures of communication. So if you have any disclosures you want to make, go ahead and raise your hand and let us know. Alexis, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Love this photo. Happy fall. So I'm part of the Kenton Neighborhood Association up in North Portland, and I just wanted to let people know that that association sent a letter to City Council regarding the use of lead fuel still at PIR. And specifically, so that's specifically to about for Parks and Rec, but since it touches on council outreach and some of the bureaus, I just thought I would mention it here. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Alexis. Bob, I think you were next.
Hi, I just wanted to note that Audubon had sent out an action alert, also submitted written testimony and oral testimony about the floodplain resilience plan. We also did all three of those things around the totally spacing the never mind. I'll let it go for now. Sorry.
No.
The other thing we were focusing on. My apologies. It's been a long day.
No worries. If it comes to you, feel free to raise your hand and let us know. Tom.
I have one item, but Alexa's comment triggered something that relates to my comment, and I'll share that too. So I just wanted to mention that the other day I was downtown and I went by the Hawthorne Bridge, and there's a very large BES outfall at that location. And I happened to just glance over at it, and I was on my bike, and it was like there was some strange color. So I rode my bike down there, and then there was some kind of discharge that was coming out of the pipe, and it was not raining. So obviously it was not stormwater. Anyway, it's called, since we've just got through working on the MS4 stormwater management permit, as we all talked about at the last meeting, et cetera. So this is one of those things that BES has to do. And so I called the number, and I thought I would share that with everybody. It's 823-1700. If you ever see something strange coming out of a pipe, you can call that number, and then BES will respond and investigate. If they can, they'll try and find out the source and try and stop it. If it's a problem, they'll identify whether it's a problem as well. Anyway, so I'm saying that, and then I'd also like to say, as it relates to what Alexis just brought up, which is lead. Lead is a pollutant of concern with regard to the stormwater management plan, and I think, Alexis, it might be good to discuss that with somebody in the MS4 program at BES, because not only are you getting lead potentially in the air, but that lead comes down and gets into stormwater. So it might be something that BES should check out and find out, is there any lead because of the racing that's going on there? Do they check for lead? So that may be something we could talk about offline if you wanted more information or a number to call regarding that issue. That's it for me.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I'll follow up with you offline.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Tom. Bob, did you remember?
Right.
Go for it.
Thanks to Tom, my brain is back on again.
Hooray.
Just been one of those days. Yeah, no, we also did an action alert and submitted pretty extensive comments on the MS4 as well. So my apologies for having a little brain melt on there, but I wanted folks to be aware of that, because we were fairly critical of that, and they're a little different than the comments that were submitted by the pub. So thanks.
Great, thank you, all three of you. Any other disclosures before we move on? I don't see any hands, so move on to public comment. Amy, do we have any public comments scheduled?
I did not receive any in advance.
Okay. Anyone in attendance that wants to make a public comment? Feel free to raise your hand. I do not see any hands. So I think we can move on to approving the draft minutes. Did anyone have any edits that they would like to make? Oh, I see a hand from Jessica.
Hi there. I'm sorry. Just took me a minute to figure out the raise hand.
Do you want
Yeah.
to make a public comment?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'm just here just because, kind of continued concerns about rate increases with BES and Portland Water Bureau. And I've submitted some testimony to the city council on the issue related to the recent bond issuance that was approved. Just in that issue, but it's an overarching concern that, we're looking at close to 10% increase per year, which is unheard of in any other utility rate structure. So just continued concerns there. And I appreciate this forum and this ability to kind of act as a watchdog on those rates. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jessica. Any other public comments before we move on to the minutes? Okay, I don't see any hands, so we'll move on to the minutes. Does anyone on the board have any edits for the September 15th pub meeting minutes? I don't see any hands. So the minutes will be accepted as is. So now on to our first item on the agenda, discussion item, is the review of pub's beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles. So Amy's going to pull this up on the screen, but as a reminder, this is something that I think the comments originally came from Lorraine, and Lorraine and Heather have been working in between meetings. So, and Amy sent out the edits beforehand, but Lorraine, I welcome you to the floor. And do you want to share with us your process in making these edits?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Sarah. If you remember when this discussion first came up for me, one of the things that I suggested is that we have a statement that clean water is a human right. And there several suggestions came up after that about, sanitation, the environment, and many other additions. In addition to just the statement that clean water is a human right. And as a result of that, we decided to take it offline and discuss it a little bit. And we reference the United Nations General Assembly resolution and all those things. And our conversation offline brought us back to the original intent, is that in addition to all the additional things that were suggested, that there be a main statement, which is clean water is a human right. And then we have the rest of it. Every person needs clean and affordable drinking water and sanitation, healthy communities, and healthy watersheds. So as you see, it's not that much editing that happened, but I think the original intent was to have a statement that stands on its own that says clean water is a human right. So that is a synopsis of our conversation. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, when we met to talk a little bit more and drill down about the whys and the hows. We got to that. Any other questions? Any questions?
Thank you, Lorraine. Yeah, Tom, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I didn't have a question about those two bullets, but I did have thoughts about number 5, bullet number 5. Those most directly affected by racial and economic inequity should be afforded culturally appropriate, etc. So I thought it might be better to try not to be I don't know what the word is, but using the word most directly affected seems like it requires somebody to make a determination that a person is most directly affected versus just make it those affected by racial and economic inequities should be afforded. And then I thought culturally appropriate is another sort of judgment call. Somebody has to make a judgment as to whether it's culturally appropriate. I think we should take that out and just say should be afforded opportunities to speak for themselves. So I would suggest we change it to those people affected by racial and economic inequities should be afforded opportunities to speak for themselves. I would suggest we consider that.
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to push back on the culturally appropriate portion of your comment. I think it's very important to acknowledge that there are different ways to communicate, and it does depend on the various cultures and backgrounds that people bring. And also just acknowledging that, like, the way that maybe, government interacts with people is not the way, like the only way of doing things. And sometimes, like, so I'm a communicator, I need to know, like, that there's different ways that different cultures communicate. So it's not even like it's not my opinion. It's not my, like, I'm not making a judgment call. I'm respecting how various cultures do communicate. And that's something that is really important when we're trying to, like, connect with everyone. And so it's, I really do feel like culturally appropriate should remain. Lorraine, I see your hand up. Go for it.
Thanks, Sarah. I was actually going to ask Tom to define what his interpretation of culturally appropriate is that he would like removed.
Good question. That's part of the reason that it concerned me, is that I don't exactly know what culturally appropriate means in the context of this statement that we're making. Now, I do agree, Sarah, that the way you just expressed what you said gives me a thought that, okay, this is us. This is the pub saying that we should afford people the opportunity to speak for themselves. And again, then it's on us or somebody to, if you have it in here, then somebody has to decide what is culturally appropriate. I agree with you. There are many cultures, and even within the same culture, there's many ways that people think differently, and I definitely want to respect that. I just, the way, for me, and we're all different, but for me, the way this sounds is that it needs a definition. It needs some way to express what does culturally appropriate mean as we're trying to use it here in this. And so anyway, I just think I'm trying to look at this from the standpoint of saying, okay, I'm on the board, but what are people that are looking at these statements that are not on the board, the average citizen that's out there, and do they understand what we're trying to say? So the plainer we speak, I think it's helpful. So anyway, it's that's just my thoughts. It seems like if we don't take it out, I think we need to define it somewhere, like we do with, like, wrongful conduct. We use the word, those two words quite often in our statements, and we do finally, toward the end of our statements, we give a definition of wrongful conduct. So I think this, if we have it in here, then we need some way to help people understand what it means when they see it, if they don't know what it means.
Thank you, Tom. I am wondering if anyone has either additional comments about the bullet, but I think, I do want to make sure that we're focusing on the edits that Lorraine and Heather have proposed, since that was the work that they're bringing to the board, and we're hoping to vote on today so that we can adopt this. So anyone have Alexis, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that these edits make a lot of sense. And I like the inclusion of sanitation in the second one, as then it helps to cover the work of both bureaus of water and environmental services, because I know that that was something we discussed, whatever meeting that was, is making sure that we're being inclusive of both of the bureaus. So nice job. And I really like the affirmation up front that kind of is guiding why we do this work and why we're all here. So thank you to the drafting team.
Thank you, Alexis. Any other questions or comments? Focusing on just the top two bullets for right now, and maybe we can circle around to Tom's comments just to make sure that those are covered.
This is Tom again. Regarding the first two bullets, I think I did say that I agree with what's shown there. Yeah.
Great.
This is Robin.
Robin.
I would say that I am definitely in favor of putting clean water as a human right as that number one talking point, focus point, value. And I also agree with the addition of the and sanitation to really highlight the responsibility of both sides of providing these natural resources. So yeah, I'm very much in support of the editing that we have provided today.
Great, thank you. So as a traditionally non-voting member and still a non-voting member, I am new to leading this board through a vote and discussion, but I'm going to do my best here. So I'm hearing a lot of agreements in support of the edits in the top two bullets. So it seems like this might be a good time to maybe someone can put a motion forward if you all feel like you want to adopt these two edits. Yes, Lorraine, I see your hand. Go for it.
I want to move a motion, but before that, I was just reading it again because we also struck out is entitled to.
Sure.
And that was intentional, because being entitled to and actually acknowledging that is a need. That is why we striked out the is entitled to. Not everybody who is entitled to actually get what they're entitled to. So that was intentional also. And I just needed to point that out. So I want to just move that we adopt the changes that were made to the pub.
I think
someone else.
No, Amy usually has some sort of motion language is what
Oh, great.
on the slides. There we go.
Oh, okay. This is easy. I just need to read. Adopt amended belief, values, and anti-racist principles as discussed during meeting. There we go. Simple.
Seconded.
Great. Okay, so we have Lorraine put a motion and that was seconded by Christopher. And now is time for pub discussion, and then we will have a public comment period. I see a hand raised from the public. So we will get to that during the public comment period, and then we will have a vote. So is there, I know Tom put forward some discussion about a new bullet. Is there any further discussion about that new, either Tom's comments or about the 2 bullets that and edits that Lorraine brought forward?
Sarah, this is Tom. I think
Yeah.
because the motion is regarding the first 2 bullets, as I thought I heard it made, the discussion about the other bullets would be a separate item that we would get to after we do this vote on the first 2 bullets.
Okay.
I think that's the way it would go.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, at least we could get those 2 done. because I
Yes,
think-
let's get the 2 done. Yeah, agree. This is what happens when you have a non-voting person in charge. So any further discussion from pub on the motion that has been seconded? I don't see any hands from pub. So now, Amy, I see you're unmuting.
Yes, I was asked by the member of the public, the Portland Advocates for Lead-Free Drinking, and they do not have audio, so they asked me to share their comment on their behalf. So they asked me to share their input that, in quotes, clean drinking water is a human right, end quote. They stated that Director Selmer makes that distinction, so that is what they were advocating for. So that
Great.
was the public comment that they wanted to share.
Thank you. And they still have their hand up. Was there anything else from the public? Or was that just, okay, residual
That's
hand up?
everything in my comments. So if you have more that you wanted to share, feel free to send me additional chat and I can add it to the comment. I have not received anything more and it looks like they put their hand down. So that was the end of the comment that I received.
Okay. Any further discussion from the board?
Excuse me, this is Tom again. I didn't quite understand how the public comment related to what was that public comment suggesting a change in the wording that we are voting on?
So my understanding, and I can share, I mean, Lorraine, you can step in, but as well, since Heather is not here, but I did listen in on the conversation as well. There were both suggestions for, let me pull up the actual language so that it might be easier. So the language as it's written is clean water is a human right. And they were stating that it should be clean drinking water is a human right. So they capitalized drinking water, saying that that was an important distinction. The discussion that took place with Heather and Lorraine was that having it broader to encompass all forms of water was important and more encompassing, and it included both drinking water and other forms of water.
And thanks, Amy. Your memory is better than mine. And the second bullet, I think, covers that, because I think when I first suggested clean water as a human right, that is one of the things we started going into these different iterations of clean drinking water or clean water and sanitation and clean water. And we want to, the intent is to have that clear statement, clean water is a human right. And then the second bullet says, every person needs clean and affordable drinking water and sanitation. So that was intentional to keep that first bullet simple and specific, and then go on to this second bullet and incorporate that defining affordable, that it's drinking water, because I think it's a bigger issue when we talk about clean water as a human right. That covers so much more. It means that it talks about, it possibly includes pollution. What type of pollution are we talking about? How do we maintain or clean water? So that's just somebody thinking we had around this whole issue.
Thank you both, Amy and Lorraine, for all of the additional information.
This is Amy, just because their hand is raised, just to be more clear, they did add clarification that clean source water is different than clean treated drinking water. So clean, properly treated drinking water is different. So
Got it.
the end. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Tom, I saw your hand, and then Robin. I think that was the order.
Yeah, I think so. So I just wanted to add, I really agree with our first statement, and to follow up on some of what Lorraine said, the Safe Drinking Water Act actually says safe drinking water. That's the act by Congress that is used to, that we're all supposed to comply with. The other act, the Clean Water Act, which addresses sanitation, stormwater, and other things, actually was originally defined way back when to make the waters swimmable and fishable. And so clean water, to me, as we're using it, I see it being comprehensive and simply stated, and that it covers everything. And then bullet number 2, as Lorraine said, I agree that then we do specifically talk about drinking water. And I guess if we wanted to be, I would make the assumption if we're saying clean, that means it's safe. So anyway,
Thank you,
I like what we've got.
Great. Thank you. Robin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm still in favor of adding that first bulletin, and the only thing that I'm kind of sitting on is just the elimination of is entitled to in the second bulletin point and switching it to needs. Part of me feels like entitled to just feels like a more forceful value in a positive way than needs. And when I read it along with the other statements, they very much come with some oomph with them. And so I'm kind of leaning towards the is entitled to for that second bulletin point. If anything else, I would be maybe wanting to actually engage both of them, where it's like every person requires clean drinking water and sanitation and thus is entitled to it. And that way we can acknowledge our need, but also very much it's a statement to say that someone is entitled to something. And I just feel like the way that to say is entitled to just feels like it has a little bit more oomph to it, has a little bit more, this is what we're here and this is what we stand for, kind of. And so that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Robin. Anyone else from the board have additional thoughts, comments? Lorraine, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yes. So thanks, Robin, for bringing up those points, because when we were myself and Heather, along with Amy, what we were talking about it, and this is where I sit when I hear it entitled. Okay, so there are a lot of things in the United States of America that people are entitled to, right? Justice system, safety, all these different things. However, when we start looking at disparities, does entitlement really create that space or that oomph that you're talking about that comes with that word entitled, right? So that's why I was sitting when I said it's a need. It's not a want, it's a need. Every person needs clean and affordable drinking water. And that is the difference that I saw with using the word entitled, because there are a lot of entitlements that don't go across the board. And that's where I'm sitting when I hear the word entitlement, right? Because I know when I show up in certain places, I may be entitled to certain things, but the actions of the person who is there to facilitate it prevents that from happening. And sometimes I have to fight for that entitlement. So that is where I'm sitting. I don't know if needs express it better than that, but that's what entitlement, that's the connotation behind entitlement when we were talking about, when we were discussing what entitlement meant here. So I just wanted to give that perspective.
Thank you, Lorraine. Really appreciate you sharing that with the board. I see a thumbs up from Robin. Okay. Tom and then Alexis.
Yeah, I just feel on this issue that our first bullet says clean water is a human right. So I think we've already covered the entitlement there by us saying that it's a human right. Now, I don't want to complicate things, and I just want to say this because it came to mind, but we haven't talked about all the other living things that have the right to clean water. All the fish and the bugs and the birds and things that, especially those things that directly live in water, such as various fish and other species. So it's almost like, but I don't want to get into that. But I do think it's something missing. Clean water is a human and other species right. And those other species should have the right to clean water too. And who's the species that most contaminates or pollutes the water? It's not the bugs and the fish, it's us. So anyway, but I don't want to try and suggest changing this now, but that's my heartfelt feeling, is that we're forgetting about all these other living things because we're focusing on ourselves.
Thank you, Tom. I think the great thing about these beliefs, values, and anti-racist principles is that we revisit them every year. So you can think on that. If we can adopt these changes as they are, and you can marinate on that through the year, and then when this comes up again at the beginning of next fiscal year, we can have that conversation. But thank you for sharing your thoughts. Alexis, go for it.
I appreciate what you just said, Tom, and also that we have the opportunity to continue to revisit these instead of needing to wordsmith this further. I was going to suggest that every person requires clean and affordable drinking water and sanitation, just to get at the to make it a little bit stronger than needs, because I hear Robin on that. And then I agree fully with Lorraine that entitled 2 has some issues with it. So suggest requires, I don't feel like super strongly on that, but if that is a good word to substitute there, then for consideration by the board.
Julia, go for it. I see your hand.
Just super fast. I second that. I think requires threads the needle and gets at more what we're trying to say. Because just seconding.
And I'm seeing a thumbs up from Robin as well. Amy, help.
Okay, so since a motion was made, let's see, who Lorraine moved and Chris seconded. I guess I forget Robert's rules. And so I mean, we kind of do them generally loosely. Lorraine, do you like or do you accept the amendment, the friendly amendment of replacing needs with requires?
Amy, I'm trying to remember if that was one of the words we considered.
It is,
And
yeah.
I think, and for some reason we landed on needs, and
I think we were open. My recollection is that with you and Heather that we were open to either, and we ended up with needs, but either, and or we were trying to come up with them, but I don't even remember for sure whether we had requires as one of them, but we were trying to come up with something better than entitled to.
entitled, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but requires makes sense.
So Lorraine,
Is that something that you're in agreement with?
yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And Chris, do you, since you seconded, is that something you support as well?
Sounds great.
Okay.
Whatever it takes to drive forward, please.
All right. All right. So it sounds like the friendly amendment is accepted. So
Great. So then do we go to vote now?
yes.
Hooray. Okay. So I'm listed as 1A. I am not a voting member. So Christopher, you are first to vote.
I vote yes.
This is Robin, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Bob, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Lorraine Wilson, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Tom Lipton, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Alexis Rife, voting member. I vote yes.
Teresa Huang, voting member. I vote yes.
Julia DeGraw, I vote yes.
Great. I think that is all of our voting members. And these edits have been adopted. Hooray. And it was a group effort. Appreciate all of you supporting me through this process. So thank you so much. So we are going to move on to our next item. And we're right on time. This is so exciting. So we're going to be covering wholesale agreements. Several meetings ago, there was a public comment from a resident in Gresham regarding wholesale agreements, and PUM members had a few questions about how do wholesale agreements work. Water Bureau provided some general information regarding agreements, and Cecilia, Water Bureau's finance manager, is here to provide some additional information about wholesale agreements. And then afterwards, Amy is going to follow up with some other additional information from our wholesale providers. So welcome, Cecilia. I hand it over to you.
Thank you. I guess for the record, I'm Cecilia Hoon with the Portland Water Bureau. And thank you for having me here today. I'll be providing a general overview of the regional water sales agreement, also known as our wholesale contracts. Next slide, please. But two of the current wholesale agreements were signed in July of 2026. The two that signed on later were Palatine Hill Water District. They signed on in 2007. And City of Sandy signed on in 2008. The wholesale agreements are with three cities, City of Gresham, Sandy, and Tualatin. We have what we call the 6 small water companies. They have less than 100 connections. And we also have about 10 water districts that we have wholesale agreements with. And these are just listed alphabetically. Next slide. The terms of the regional water sales agreement are 5 years. And 5 years are with the 6 small water companies. We have then the 10 or 20 years with the cities and water districts. In 2006, those that signed on for the 10-year term were City of Tualatin, TBWD, Tualatin Valley Water District, Lake Grove Water District, Pleasant Home. And at that time, City Tigard also signed on for a 10-year agreement. Their contract terminated, after the 10 years was up. So they terminated their contract with us on June 30th of 2016. And then we have 9 cities and water districts that signed on for a 20-year term agreement. And they're listed there: Gresham, Rockwood, West Slope, Valley View, Burlington listed, Palatine, and City of Sandy, all signed on for a 20-year agreement. Next slide. Are you all still hearing me okay? Okay, sorry. I'm getting a little note that says my internet is unstable, so I want to make sure I'm not cutting in and out for you. So all of the terms of the agreements are essentially the same. Those for the shorter term, so 10 years, do pay a higher rate of return, 1% higher than those that signed on for the 20-year agreement. The key components of the agreement includes the guarantee minimum purchase quantity, which basically means that the amount that they signed on to buy from us, they are paying for that regardless of whether they actually take that water or not. And they signed up for that minimum purchase at the time that they signed the agreement in 2006 or 2007 for Palatine and 2008 for City of Sandy. What the minimum purchase, of course, quantity provides Portland is that it does provide us very stable revenue. We know exactly how much revenue we get from our wholesale customers on an annual basis at the minimum. They can certainly buy more water from us if they like. But again, the current agreement requires them to pay for the minimum purchase that they had signed on when they initially signed the agreement. The wholesale rates are calculated annually. Sorry, I'm sort of checking my notes to make sure I covered most of everything about guaranteed minimum purchase. Sorry, wholesale rate calculations, those are calculated on an annual basis. Wholesale rates are generally much lower than the retail rate, and that's because they only pay for maintenance of the asset. I'm sorry, they don't pay for the assets that are Portland has to maintain that are outside our streets. So essentially, our wholesale customers are paying for the facilities that are used to serve them. So everything in the bull run, the source of supply, they help pay for. They're paying for the conduits for conveying the water to them. But the hydrants that are out on the street, the mains that are in front of our streets, they don't have to pay for that because those are not assets that are used to serve them. Rates are determined according to a very complex set of variables and methodology. Using a complex, we have a rate model that we use to calculate rates on an annual basis. And our model essentially allocates the cost to each wholesale customers, again, based on the various demand of their amount of water that they're buying, demand that they have on our system. And it's based on the specific water system assets, again, the assets that that are used to serve them. So those are essentially very specific provisions that are written into the current agreement. Next slide. So what I have here is a table of all of our wholesale customers, what we're collecting from them in the current fiscal year. You can see the contract termination dates are coming up. Many are coming up in 2026. With a couple, Palestine in 27, again, that's 20 years from the time they signed on, and then Sandy is in 2028. The quantity that they signed up initially is the next column. That's how much they're buying based on that amount, and the rate that we have calculated for each one of the wholesale customers, the amount of revenue that we're expecting to collect from them. You can see the second column from the right represents a percentage of the wholesale revenue that each wholesale customer represents. So TVWD represents 42% of the total wholesale revenue, which is $20.3 million that we're expecting this year. The last column gives you a sense of the total revenue that we're getting from wholesale customer in respect to the water sale revenue that we collect. So 9% of our total water sale revenue is from our wholesale revenues. And you can see how much of the individual wholesale customers represent in, again, the big pie of total water sales revenue that we collect on but that we're expected to collect this year. Next slide, please. So with the agreements coming up to end, we have started working on a new agreement, and I can tell you that it's really not too early to start working on a new agreement. It feels like, we still got 4 years before, or less than 4 years now, before the current contract or agreement expires. But my understanding is that the current agreement that we have in place took at least 5 years of negotiation among the wholesale customers in Portland. It also did require everyone to concede on some of the terms. So you can imagine a lot of back and forth that happens. There's a lot of discussions. So right now, where we still have 4 years left, I actually feel a little pressure to make sure that we have an agreement in place by the end of June 30th, 2026. We know that TVWD has been working on another supply source to replace Portland for the most part, their Willamette project. Rockwood and Gresham has a joint venture to invest in wells that they want to replace, that would be used to replace, again, purchasing water from us. We also saw this as a huge opportunity to have new agreements and terms, largely because of, there are, again, provisions that were, both parties conceded to that, they weren't totally happy about, as I understand it. And the one big one for our wholesale customers, as I understand it, is that minimum purchase quantity. When they signed up, that felt like that's the right amount of water that they need to serve their customers. But the reality is, over the last decade, more than a decade now, that water use has been trending downward. And that's primarily as a result of the continued conservation efforts that we've been seeing across the country, not just the region, that we're seeing this trend downward due to conservation and plumbing code changes. So if you think about every fixture that are being purchased, every dishwasher, for example, that you buy, is more efficient than the last dishwasher that you purchased. So it continues to be, our fixtures are more efficient, so water use continues to come down. So that is a big one that they would like to do away with. What they signed up, obviously, again, is a minimum purchase, and it does require Portland's approval to reduce. And we have not provided that. The current agreement does require that we provide a 5-year non-renewal notice. Either party could have done that. We would have expected a notice from TBWD, probably Rockwood and Gresham, if we haven't provided it, that 5-year renewal notice. So we have last fiscal year provided a 5-year non-renewal notice to all of our wholesale customers. And that's primarily to ensure that, you know, we move everyone to a new agreement at the same time. It gets very complicated administratively. If you imagine we have a rate model that helps us do the calculation. If the terms are different, then the calculation could be different. That is an administrative nightmare to try to manage and set rates for, you know, all 19 wholesale customer, even, you know, a dozen or 15 when we need renew. So we have provided that notice to, you know, help move everyone to a new agreement at the same time. At the same time that we provided that 5-year non-renewal notice to our wholesale customers, we also had a MOU, a memorandum of understanding, where we would, you know, agree, and all our wholesale customers signed because they wanted to participate, and they're a key stakeholder in the current effort, and they all agree and would want to work, build on our working relationship and to work collaboratively on this new agreement. So I do have all 19 wholesale customers at the table. They don't all make it to every meeting, but certainly they have been very involved with the conversations that we've had to date on, you know, the new agreement, on a new agreement that we hope to have in place. Next slide, please. So where are we as far as the new agreement that we hope to have in place by July 1 of 2026? We have been talking about new terms, which means some of the provisions require us to calculate the rates slightly differently. One new provision to the agreement that currently does not exist in a current agreement is offering emergency supply to those that have their own source, own water supply source. So especially folks that are leaving us, like TBWD, Gresham, and Rockwood, they have expressed high desire to continue to have Portland to provide them water supply in an event of emergency for them. So we're still working out, again, through a lot of the details of the terms. We have retained a consultant. FCS is Financial Consulting Services, to help facilitate a lot of these negotiations. This is a firm that works with other jurisdictions on wholesale agreements. I know they are involved with wholesale negotiations with Seattle as a wholesale provider. We are, FCS is, we're also working on a new wholesale rate model for us that is under development based on the new terms that we're talking about. That way we'll have a new model that we can, you know, use to calculate rates based, you know, following the new provisions that we will have in the new agreement. Our new agreements will need to go to council for approval. So that is an action that we will have in the future. And we will need to have new agreements in place again by July 1 of 2026. And then I think that's my last slide. I'm going to just turn it over to maybe Amy before we start questions.
Thank you, Cecilia.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me pull up my slides so that I can share the information that I was able to gather. All right, so Cecilia touched on a little bit of some of the few jurisdictions that are they're aware are developing their own source. So Gresham and Rockwood, they developed their own groundwater source early in the 2000s, initially just to augment in peak summer months primarily. But since they were notified in 2017 that the city was implementing filtration and that costs were going to be going up, they hired a consultant and developed a groundwater master plan so that they could evaluate the costs and do some analysis of what the cost comparison would be, and all the kind of analyze all the benefits of kind of a groundwater master plan compared to continuing to purchase wholesale from the city of Portland, and ultimately have decided to move forward with the groundwater master plan. And so both Gresham and Rockwood are moving forward, as Cecilia mentioned, with their groundwater system, well system, and what they identified as the primary benefits. So in response to your questions about what the reasons why they're choosing alternate source, was for them cost savings, another regional supply, seismic resiliency, and local control and decision-making processes. Tualatin Valley Water District, they actually began their development of their alternate source, the Willamette water supply system, before the city was pursuing the filtration system. So it was not related to cost of the wholesale. They began their studies back in 2012 and began planning and development and construction, I think, in 2016. What they have listed as the benefits of their source, their selected source, is the water quality, the redundancy systems, ownership and control of the supply, the year-round reliability, and the value. They considered all of their potential viable sources. So that included the city of Portland's wholesale, as well as some of their other sources, including upper and lower Tualatin Basin, Columbia River groundwater wells, local groundwater, the Willamette, and then the Bull Run Columbia South Shore well field. So that's what I was able to gather from those 3 jurisdictions.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
For pulling that information together and sharing that with everyone. So I'll open it up to the board if there is any questions, comments, discussion about either the information that Cecilia provided or the information that Amy provided from the wholesale water districts themselves. Yeah, Tom, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple things. One is that I notice in the information, Cecilia, that you presented, you show the different rates for the different customers. And it appears, and this is an assumption, so it's basically a question of confirmation. It appears that the cities like Gresham, Sandy, and the Rockwood organization, that their wholesale rate is much lower than a lot of the other entities that are wholesale or other wholesale customers. For instance, those on the what appeared to be, it appears to be a geographic distinction between east and west. So Sandy, Gresham, and Rockwood, et cetera, are closer to the source of Portland water than, for instance, Lake Grove or Valley View. Well, I don't even know where Valley View water is, but so my basic question is am I correct in assuming that, or that the closer these different wholesalers are to our source, the less they pay for the water? And for instance, Gresham pays 83 cents for a certain quantity of water, which makes me wonder, I'm still kind of really perplexed why Gresham doesn't want to just stick with Portland water it seems like they're probably getting a pretty good rate, but I guess their study must say that it's going to be even cheaper for them to go away from Portland. But anyway, but the basic question is it correct that the rates are one of the factors in the rates is the distance that we have to have facilities to supply that entity, such as the difference between Gresham and Lake Grove Water District. Is that correct, the geographic distance?
Yes, that is one reason
Okay.
for the lower rate on the east side is much less infrastructure needed to serve them versus those on the west side. You can just imagine there's more piping and the storage that we have in place to also serve those on the west side. The other component, and Amy touched on this in her information about Gresham and Rockwood, they also have extremely low peaking factor. In fact, no peaking factor because they're using their own source to peak for their peak use. So that's another factor that goes into the rates is how much are they using, depending on our system. And so the higher peaking system, that they have, the more that they are utilizing our system, which requires us to, size our system in a way that can serve them for their peak use. So those are the two primary reasons. Of course, the amount of water that they're buying, quantity of water that they're also buying. So those are all factors that goes into it. But yeah, largely you see, quite a bit of a divide from those on the east side versus the west side. East side tends to have a lower rate, and west side tends to have a higher rates than those on the east side, primarily because of the infrastructure that we have in place to serve those that we need to have in place to serve those on the west side. So being close to the source, has their advantages for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Tom. Any other questions from the board? Yeah, Alexis, go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much for the presentation, Cecilia, and to Amy for pulling together that other information. I'm trying to formulate what my actual question is, but maybe it's more of a comment and an observation that if I'm reading this table, right, that this is a significant source of income for Portland Water Bureau. And so like I said, I'm not really sure what my question is, but I guess I'm curious what the impact is of losing some of these agreements are on the Bureau and how you would make up for that, I guess is the question. But $20 million, 9% potentially could be significant. So I'm just curious kind of where the thinking and the planning is around the potential loss of some of this of revenue.
Sure. Well, first of all, we're not losing all
of it. Yeah, true.
Yeah. So not all of it. Just the top three though, which is still a significant amount to your point. We got the 8.6 million from 12 TVWD, Rockwood and Gresham combined another 6 million. So you're looking at 14. Yeah, quite a bit of that 20.3 million. We have, for financial planning purposes, we have assumed that that we won't be receiving the revenues from these three wholesale customers starting with fiscal year 26-27. So that is in our financial forecast. We have included that for sort of smoothing out our rates. Our rate forecast currently already has those revenue losses being made up essentially with higher retail rates. So we have smoothed that so that you're not seeing that huge jump in retail rate increase in that 1 year. So our forecast is smoothed out at 7.7% rate increase to recognize that we will not be receiving that revenue. What we don't have in our financial planning is what the new wholesale agreement could be bringing in. as far as revenue. So I talked about having new provisions related to providing emergency supply to those three at the minimum. Hopefully others will sign on that currently aren't our wholesale customers. So those are revenues that we hope to be receiving. That's not in our forecast. So until we have a better sense of where we end up as far as what the new terms are going to look like, we won't, we'll be able to update our financial plan accordingly.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, everybody, if you have questions and I jumped in here. I'm just kind of curious. Actually, I'm perplexed about why it is that the City of Portland Water Bureau has not looked for or acquired other sources of water as Gresham is planning to do themselves. For instance, we're building the treatment plant, and we're going to have to treat all of the cryptosporidium, but there's no cryptosporidium in the groundwater. So it seems like when we were working, when the Water Bureau and the city was working on the cryptosporidium issue, that seems like that might have been a good idea to look at additional sources to help, additional sources that don't have the cryptosporidium issue. So is this something that was discussed in previous years about Portland's supply of water, or was it something that was just not really thought of? Portland, the question being Portland looking for and acquiring other sources of water that do not have the cryptosporidium issue, such as groundwater, as Gresham is currently doing.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question, Tom, correctly. Are you suggesting that are you asking if we looked at and explored other sources to replace our Bull Run supply source?
I wouldn't say replace it, but potentially augment it so that we would have less water that we have to treat for cryptosporidium. The less, so having cleaner sources of water, such as groundwater, at least cleaner relative to cryptosporidium, it seems that would have been something that came up. So the question is, has Portland looked at acquiring more sources of water, which I didn't even know there was anything out there till this issue came up, and Gresham's going to have its own source of water, and they're not going to need any of our water except for an emergency backup. So why didn't we do that? I guess that's basically it. Why didn't we, City of Portland, acquire more groundwater sources?
So we do have the Columbia South Shore Wellfield as our second source right now.
No, I'm saying, why didn't we get more? I know we have what we have. Why didn't we get more?
Right, I understand what you're asking, and let me just sort of maybe put things in proportion for you to help understand. Unless we're talking about, we're talking about adding source or supply, but still retain Bull Run, right? We would still be looking at doing the treatment plant for cryptosporidium, to comply with that. For Gresham and Rockwood, they're going to the groundwater to replace Portland, but their use is significantly less than Portland's use. So they're in total between Gresham and Rockwood, they're looking at about 15 million gallons a day to be replaced with groundwater instead of buying from Portland. And Portland on average day is closer to 80 million gallons. And that's just on the winter months. So, in the summer, it would be even more. So we would be looking at a lot of groundwater in a way that would to reduce the amount of Bull Run water that we'll be treating. That help?
Well, that didn't answer the question as to why didn't we, so you're saying that is the reason that we didn't look into getting other sources?
No, I don't want to suggest that we didn't look, and I can certainly go back and ask that question of the Bureau or the engineers that probably looked at this. But I just want to make sure that I don't want to sound like groundwater would be able to reduce the need for filtration plant.
Well, what I mean by not the need for the plant, but the need to filter the amount of water. So 15 million gallons,
Right.
if Gresham's getting 15 million gallons, you take that out of 80 million gallons, and that means we treat 65 versus 80. So I'm just wondering if that went into the studies that were done to evaluate whether it made sense to get more backup. And in the times that we all live in, with the strange things happening with climate and everything else,
Sure.
it seems that looking at more backup than is always potentially a prudent thing to do. So anyway,
So,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that
Yeah,
we
I don't want to
cover
go
other, I do just want to point out too, our groundwater system, it costs a lot to pump water as well. So there is, pumping water from groundwater isn't free. So I wasn't part of all these conversations as a Water Bureau staff person, but I do know there is a cost associated with that. So I want to make sure that we're remembering, like, it's not just like water pops out of the ground. Tom, if you want to maybe send your question to Amy, and then Amy can send that along to the Bureau so that we can get an answer for that. I just want to make sure that we're not taking up the board's time within this meeting to follow up on that question. So any other questions or any just last thoughts from folks that, we did hear this public comment. Cecilia came to give us sort of a water agreement 101. Amy got us some information from those wholesale purchasers. Is the board feeling like we have good information for now? Okay, I see. Yeah. Hey, Christopher, go ahead.
I just had one thing I'm hoping Cecilia can give to the board, because I instinctively know, because I work for the city, but it would probably be helpful for the board to know what the difference is between how much it costs for us to pull the water out of the ground versus coming from Bull Run. Because it's my understanding it's significantly cheaper for us to pull from Bull Run as a water source rather than pulling it from the ground source. And the rest of the pub may not realize that. If there's some way for them to see, like, it's cost twice as much for us to do it out of the ground versus we're pulling it from Bull Run. I think that would be
It more
very helpful.
flows from Bull Run. It's all gravity.
Yeah.
It's all gravity.
I think that would be helpful for them.
So
Helpful for all of us.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Christopher.
I just have to interject here. And if you do that, I think it would be great to get that answer, but you have to include how much it's going to cost, how much it is costing for the filtration plant and how much it will cost after the filtration plant, because that gravity free flowing water is contaminated with cryptosporidium, or at least the threat is strong enough that we have to filter it. So you have to add that into the whatever you use. And I just have to say, it seems the city of Gresham is saying it's going to be cheaper than buying at wholesale. So
Tom, can you
throw that stuff in there?
Can you type up your questions and send that to Amy so that we can get make sure that we're getting all of your points covered by the Bureau?
Well, I don't want to type something up. You guys aren't typing something up. It's just the basic thing that makes sure we're looking at apples and apples and oranges and oranges. Okay, that's all I'm saying. I agree with what you guys are saying, but let's just make sure we've got everything on an even keel, please.
Okay. Joe, do you have something really quickly?
I guess we can hold it for later if we want to be done.
Okay. thank you so much, Cecilia, for sharing this information, answering our questions, and thank you to Amy for getting all the information. Really appreciate that. Okay. So with the last 9 minutes, I'm going to hand it back over to Amy, I think, to cover some announcements and talk about our next meeting.
Thank you. Let me see. Okay, so I just want to try to cover really quickly. So thank you to those of you who have responded to some of the emails that I have sent out. Just wanted to flag a few items for you. Administrative review committees. We do have some volunteers for, I think, some potential volunteers for December and January. And we do have somebody signed up for October. The November slot is open, as are some of the later ones next year, February, March, April. So if you are available and interested, please email me and I'll put you on the list so that we can let the bureaus know who's signed up and get you connected with that. If you have questions about participating, or if you're a newer member and want to shadow the upcoming meetings, let me know, and we can certainly make sure that you get connected for that. I have sent out emails with links to or the documents with the most recent annual report and work plan, the final letter that was submitted for stormwater. There were some materials that went out related to orientation. There are some responses from BES. The email has not gone out, so don't wonder if you haven't seen it yet. It will go out after this meeting, though. They have compiled their responses, so I will send that out to you. I will, I think that's all of the emails. If there's anything else that you're waiting on that hasn't been sent out, please let me know. There's a lot of moving parts, so hopefully there's not something else that you're expecting that hasn't gone out. I know we had been talking originally about the council work session happening this fall. In the conversations with the commissioner's office, it tentatively sounds like hopefully we'll be planning it by early December. So as soon as we have any sort of tentative dates, I will let you know so that we can begin planning that in our meetings, some of the talking points, and get some of you as volunteers signed up for that. So we'll be doing that in upcoming meetings. Also just wanted to remind you that we are eager to get any of you who may be interested in volunteering as co-chairs. If you have questions, are curious what it means as far as responsibilities, time commitment, any of that, what it means to be co-chair, reach out to me. I'm happy to chat with you. Or Karen would be happy to speak with you as well. She had agreed to continue co-chairing through the end of the year, but that means that we'll need to identify some folks who want to step into that role. Usually we have 2 co-chairs, so hopefully we'll have some new folks who are willing to step up in the coming months. So those of you with questions, reach out to me and I'm happy to answer them. Are there any other announcements before we talk about next agenda? I do have one other piece of news, but it's on the next agenda slide. So before I announce that, I want to see if there's any other announcements from the rest of you. If there are, we can come back. So I will pull up the next slide. I know we have talked a lot about financial assistance programs, and there has been a lot of interest related to the multifamily program. And I did hear from the staff that they are ready and interested and able to come to the next pub meeting to talk about the RAMP program, the Regulated Affordable Multifamily Assistance Program, and try to get some feedback and have some dialogue with the pub. So that seems like a great topic for the next meeting. So hopefully that will be one of the primary topics for the next meeting. And then we also need to start talking about all of your ideas for how to approach the budget process and how we're going to do that this year. So those are two of the primary things that I see as agenda topics for the upcoming meeting. Are there other things that folks wanted to make sure get on the table? Bob.
I would like to put the Portland Watershed Management Plan on the table for discussion in the near future. I actually learned during this meeting that the city BES has abandoned that program. That was the plan that drove all of the cities, all the BES's environmental strategies. And it's been in place for a long time. And it was fairly surprising to get an email while we were actually meeting today informing me that it's no longer considered a foundational document for the Bureau. So I'd love to hear what the thinking was there and whether the city has an environmental strategy any longer or whether it plans to develop a new one.
Anybody else? Tom.
Well, I was just thinking that what Bob just mentioned fits in with something that's been on my mind as we were looking at the MS4 permit and the requirement that the city has to do the stormwater management plan as they told us. They also mentioned that they have 2 other permits, and I think it would be really valuable, perhaps at the same time that they talk about the watershed management plan, what are the other permits? How do they work together or not? And since we were asked to give comments about one permit, has the pub ever given comments about the other permits? And or will we be asked to talk about the other permits? I'm just kind of confused about, it's the safe drinking water, or not the safe drinking water. Well, it has to do with the underground water, has to do with the treatment plant, and it has to do with the MS4. And I don't know if there's any other permits that we have, but I think that would go along with the discussion about the watershed plan, getting information about that.
Christopher.
I'm not sure how far out we want to go, but a step update would also be a good idea.
And I want to welcome Sarah's co-chair.
This is Rose. My helper just got home from preschool. Anything else? Okay.
All right, you're actually going to have like an on-time meeting.
Yes, did it. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending today's pub meeting. I appreciate all the conversation. Super appreciate everyone's patience with me as I, filled in for Karen today. And our upcoming meetings are October 20th at 11 and November 1st at 3. Is 3 or 3:30, Amy?
3:30.
Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah, that is wrong.
Keeping me on my toes. Okay.
All right.
Okay, Sarah, good job.
Yeah, thank you for
Good
stepping
job.
up. It's really nice. We appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Amy.
Bye.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Stop.
Feel that?